Oh, Lauren, she's on service at Scottish Rite, so we'll have to make sure she gets her K-Club next time. Thank you. All right, so again, keep the survey responses coming. A couple things that we wanted to go over before we get started is we've started this new little thing called K-Club Specials. It's just going over a couple of announcements, funding announcements that we think be of interest to many people in the room. One is Atlanta Pediatric Scholars K-12 program, which is a institutional K for pediatricians, physicians, scientists who are doing basic science or translational research. And then also the ACTSI KL2 Clinical Research Career Development Program offered by ACTSI. That deadline is March 1st. And you have links here. We'll give these slides out at the end so you'll have all these links. So as a reminder, we really want your input for the next two K-Clubs of the semester. November 9th is on time management. I've already gotten some great ideas and input from you all and what you want to hear about, and I'll show you that in just a moment, just to spur more ideas. We're welcoming any more ideas that you have, want to make really catered to your needs. And then just another plug for the December session is on the NIH peer review process when we have a CSR director joining us. And have some emails from some of you who would like to meet with her. Anyone else who would like to meet with her, please email me or convey that to us via the survey. Going back to the November session, the time management topics that your input on so far on, people want to learn about balancing multiple priorities, including work-life balance, managing time on a specific research project and pacing, and implementation of time management practices. So we will do our best to cover these, and whatever else specific questions you have, please be sure to convey them to us via the survey that you will then be entered into the prize drawing for. So today we'll get started now with our session. Dr. Andy Shane will be moderating, and we have a panelist of our BFFs who want to have close at hand during your research application process. So our hope is to just give you from soup to nuts overview of the people that you will likely want to engage in your application process. You know their faces. Even though many of these people have their own department/institutional affiliation, they'll likely have counterparts in other areas if they're not directly applicable to you. We've asked them to keep it very high level, institute agnostic, so hopefully even if they're not your point of contact, you'll say, oh, a person like that exists. I need to find out who they are at my institution. So in alphabetical order, I will start. I'm the self-proclaimed BFF of grant advocacy. And though I'm in Department of Pediatrics, I know other departments have people and programs that represent the same area as I do. So I first give you my little elevator speech about what I do. Break it up into two areas: our research resource portal, a centralized website. Ours is pedsresearch.org. Department of Medicine has a great research website as well. We offer cores and service centers, making sure you get the resources that you need to conduct your research. And then we also have grant boilerplate documents. When you're getting ready to write your grant application, you don't need to reinvent the wheel for just these sort of boilerplate descriptions. We provide matchmaking services to funding opportunities and to each other. And finally, information provider and educator, providing grant library materials, events and seminars like the K-Club and Research Resources 101 that I highly recommend, and then successful research grant application strategies and some grant writing. So it's on our list, our RB. So I'll turn it over to the RB specialist to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Marie Cuban, and I work at the Healthcare Development and deliver to Karen. She's one of my counterparts at Emory University IRB.
I'm Rebecca with the QA and Education team at the IRB. Again, you know, everyone there. So I'm going to start with kind of tag teaming the topic. So I'm going to get started with who is the IRB? We collectively are tasked with protect research objects. So think about it, think ethical oversight, weighing in on application regulations, requirements, various other things. We at Emory IRB have 6 biomed committees. And we're responsible also for the continuing oversight of research. So not that initial approval, but carrying on throughout the process as you continue to enroll subjects, analyze data, various other things. So hitting the high points of our slide here, what needs IRB review? This 30,000-foot view, just human subjects research as defined by DHHS. And so we can go on a long path to explain what that is, but just basically anything involving a human subject that is meeting the definition of research. And so that would be systematic investigation designed to contribute to generalizable knowledge. So that is what we need to review. Correct. So not just because we feel like it, because we have to. And when you should contact the IRB, we really want, particularly for this group, to make it clear that early in the process, we are there to provide guidance. We can walk you through, tell you what's feasible, barriers that you might face. So really get in touch with us early. And why? I think it's because you have to. Sorry. I mean, I'd love to say it just because we love it, we love you, and we want to chat with you. But at this point, I'm going to actually turn it over to Sarah Marie to touch on the where.
So I'll come to the why a little bit. Obviously, you have to for review of your studies, but other times when you can come to us with develop a project or asking us, you know, hey, if I change it something in this way, can I avoid IRB review? Or do it in a way that maybe now I can get a waiver of informed consent. There are other reasons that you can come to us and try to make your life easier. And as an added bonus, it can make our life easier, right? We need to have to go through the IRB if you don't need to. So I'll just give a brief overview of the where. So where should you go when you have a project that's collaborative? And the simple answer is you should never have to go through 2 IRBs. I can't think of any studies that we have right now where you're going through the Emory IRB and CHOA IRB because we told you to. Now, there's at least one study that I know of where it's going and they went through both IRBs because they didn't know that we could do this, but that was not because we said so. So I know of any, it's not because we told them they had to. But basically, if it's a collaborative study with just Emory and Children's, and the research is limited to the review of children's medical records, so retrospective or prospective, or the PI is solely employed by CHOA, which won't impact for very many people here, then it comes to Children's. Otherwise, it goes to Emory. It's really important to know that up front, that way you don't do all the work on IRB just to be told, hey, you've got to submit, because we don't see it until you've already done your submission form. So if you're unclear, give us a call. We can, if it's clear cut, we can tell you immediately. If it's not, it may take a day or two. We want to confer with one another. But regardless, I can't imagine it takes more than a day or two to get that determination and can save you a lot of time and heartache. Think about it, you've already done your consent forms, all that good stuff. So that you're going to the right IRB, fill out forms. There are 3 institutions involved, which happens pretty regularly. Just, you can call me. I'll be happy to be the point of contact, because each one of those cases is unique. And again, you'll only need one IRB, but we have to work out which IRB that will be.
We also have people here from other departments other than PEDS, so if they have multiple institutions, they can contact SHAR, I guess.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, so if it's just Emory. Yes. Okay, the statistics, Courtney Kraken.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Courtney McCracken. I'm the Director of Pediatric Biostatistics here at Emory. And I feel like these are pretty general timelines for anyone that needs to involve a biostatistician. And the 2 main time points that I like to get involved in are about 6 to 12 months out, 1 to 3 months out from your submission. Now, depending on your research, whether this is a patient that's going to be a multi-site clinical trial, then you definitely want to come earlier. Now, if this is something like an R21, this is K-Club, but if you are submitting a smaller grant, then you don't necessarily need to contact a biostatistician 6 to 12 months out, because you're probably not thinking about it 6 to 12 months out. Can you go to the next slide? So what I'm going to do with you 6 to 12 months out for those large research studies that you're planning. We'll discuss what kind of information you should be collecting through your literature review, we'll discuss how to narrow down your hypotheses to make sure that they're statistically testable and that your research design. And also, if it's really novel and it's difficult to do any kind of power analysis or effect size calculations to plan your study sample size, then we discuss how to get some pilot data or work with the different databases, whether it be Epic or PowerChart, to actually extract data to use in your grant application. The next slide. And then, of course, 1 to 3 months out is typically when you would want to engage a biostatistician to actually help you with determining the right sample size, writing your statistical methods, and then figuring out how much you need to engage them once your grant is funded.
This is investigational drug service pharmacy. Hope you like it for you.
Oh, great. Thank you. It's nice to apologies for not slides. I'm Jim Rogers, and I'm the pharmacist in charge of the investigational drug service for Emory University. We work closely with CHO. It also has an investigational drug service. We call ourselves the IDS. So CHO is an IDS as well. Pharmacist Jim Rose is in charge of that operation. We're separate organizations, but we do work closely with certain studies where there's some crossover between the two. But we do work closely with them. So at Emory, we're responsible for all aspects of drug management for drug studies, and that includes creating prescriptions or the orders, dosing guidelines, the dispensing function, drug accountability, temperature control, and that's just to name a few things. We charge for our service, and so we're a part of the budget process. At Emory, we work with the OCR, the Office of Clinical Research. They submit a new proposal to us when they're in the process of developing this, then they'll contact us. We'll create a budget for the pharmacy aspects of it and then give that back to them that they will then add into the overall budget. I think the process at CHO is similar to that. And then for, we work closely with investigators on the grant application process as well. Typically, we would be contacted, early in the stages of it when the budget is being thought out, developed, and we would get together numbers based on the information you provide us and give some preliminary kind of data that you would need to turn an application in. That's pretty much it.
Well, after we'll walk through a grant application and we can have questions and dig in a little bit deeper. So now we're going to go to ACTSI Research Resources. Stephanie Moss is going to represent that area.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Munster. I am the Clinical Research Manager at the Pediatric Research Center here, which is an ACTSI site. Just to get it out there, we did just go through a new rebranding and logo and new website with the ACTSI, and we are no longer known as the ACTSI. We are known as ACSI. I feel like I need a shot collar for every time I still say ACTSI because I still say it. But it is ACSI now. ACSI is one of the main NIH Clinical Translational Science Awards. It's a CTSA site. The Pediatric Research Center here located in Children's is a CRN site. So services ACSI offers is joint collaboration between Emory and Georgia Tech and Morehouse School of Medicine, the Prime Award. We have many significant partners, with Children's being one of them, University of Georgia, Kaiser. So I consider ACSI an entire kind of metro Atlanta, and now it's moving in statewide for research resources out of this main grant. So it's a very broad perspective, and it's kind of a glue that holds multiple sites together. And I think a lot of people don't realize how far the reaches of ACSI are in the metro Atlanta. So specifically for CRN services, that's the Clinical Research Network portion of the ACSI grant. Those are the actual sites where you can conduct your research. There are 28 clinical research sites here in Metro Atlanta that are funded either partially, really partially in a joint collaboration, much like the Research Center here at Children's. We have a three-tier approach. There's hospital-based research clinics, there's medical office, and there's community-based. Hospital-based are like the one here. There's also an adult-based research center over at Emory University Hospital. There's an inpatient, outpatient at Grady. there is an outpatient clinic at Emory Midtown, so it's hospital-based all over Metro Atlanta. Medical office here, the Grady Ponce Clinic is a well-known, the infectious disease clinic for outpatient Winship across the street. Community-based, there's a community-based services out of the VA, but there's multiple sites, and all this information can be found in this brochure, which is on the back table. For pediatrics specifically, there's a site, an in-hospital site here at Children's, but also Emory Children's Center or Children's Specialty Services in the clinic is also a site. And they basically focus on community discovery and training. That's a big portion of the ACSI philosophy. So it's not just the clinical research network support, but also training and grant, project development and grant support. So support services, I think these are great if you can reach out, and I would say some of these are the equivalent of Courtney. So the BIS portion is the Biomedical Informatics program out of ACSI. There's also the BIRD, which is the Biostatistical and Epidemiology Research Design core group out of ACSI. And then, of course, the CRN. And I think something that's very, I mean, I don't know how much it's utilized over there, but I think as far as pediatrics and underutilized is you can request a studio on the ACSI website. Anyone can request this, and all of these services, so bioinformatics, the biostatistical department, a representative from CRN will all come and help you with your program, with your protocol development. So make sure you have the statistical support you need, any sort of database that you need. They offer REDCap. All these services are available to all investigators out of this award. They do offer a fair amount of training to help support things like this, like K-Club. We also have the MSCR program, which are KL2 scholars at Emory. And there's also now a certificate training program for anyone who would like a certificate based out of the ACSI as well. We have community and discovery. There's a lot of pilot grants that are offered. And then for community, we have a community engagement resource program where the philosophy is for all this that we're translating into science. Another priority of us is to actually communicate what we're finding out into the community to let them know what the science is discovering. So I have plenty of literature back on the table, and I'll touch on their feasibility when the discussion progresses.
Okay, thank you. So on the list I have Research Administration Services. Diane Samuel is going to introduce that at a high level.
Diane Samuel. For those I haven't met yet, Director of the Research Administration Services for Pediatrics. As far as pre-award is concerned, we're broken, as far as the RAS is concerned, we're broken between pre-award and post-award. What you will do on a proposal is submit an intent to submit form. That's our first notification. For the larger proposals, I would say give yourself, let us know as soon as you know. But definitely get us involved as early as possible with any proposal. So when you complete that intent to submit form, you're basically given the information that you're going to be about the proposal you're submitting, and as much information as possible, please provide that to us because we can get things started on our end.
You want me to go down?
Yeah.
And that's just for pediatrics, but it's the same type of information that medicine and other departments would want.
Both want as much information as possible.
So this is...
That's the form. There are some fields that are mandatory, others are not. Pay close attention to the comment. There's a comment section at the bottom, so any information you might have about your budget, if you already have decided, just put that information in there, and that gives us a great starting point. So just that in mind, that can be found on the Department of Pediatrics website, the link to that. So that's how you get started.
Just one more thing about that is, if you don't have a lot of information about your grant, but it's coming up fairly quickly, go ahead and fill it anyway with just whatever you know, that we know about it. Even if we don't have a whole lot of information, wait till you have a bunch of information there and it might be too late. So, you don't have a lot of information, but if you know that you're going to submit a grant and it's coming up, just let us know that.
And so in case people didn't know this, I'm assuming everyone has heard of the RADs, but they're the ones who actually help you put your application together, the administrative component, and submit it to the agency. That's why they want all this information.
Right. So we'll work with you on the budget, make sure that all the components are included, and also put, like I said, the final package together for submission.
We have the vision director and mentor, Paul Spearman, about how he can support your application in his role.
Generally, yeah, okay. First of all, when I saw the title of this, I asked, what's BFFs? Sorry, I guess I'm out of it, but I just wanted to make sure it was appropriate. So as a division director, what's the role there? Well, to be able to submit grants at Emory, extramural grants, you need to be a faculty member. You have to have a division director, I would assume, as a faculty member. So what's my responsibility and what can I help? Well, first of all, it's to my advantage to help. If you've been recruited to do some research, and if you're expected to do some research, you're expected to bring in some money to do some research, and otherwise I've got to find money to pay you for that time, which I may not have. So I'm very motivated to help you get grants, and so you and I should have a plan for how that goes. Now, I take an approach that's close to hands-off, but not really. If someone is recruited in, I think they know what they're doing, I kind of want to give them some time and make sure they have the right resources, and then check up and make sure that things are happening. But it's not a micromanaging, like pushing too much. That's the way I look at it. Now, faculty may not see it that way, but I become concerned down the line when we don't hit certain metrics. You're not putting in grants, you're not getting grants, or I'm also there for after your first several grants come in, okay, triage, and you're terribly upset, and you're not in the right field or something. I'm there to say that that's normal and that's the way it goes, and don't worry, we're still going to get this grant. So there's a lot of things that, of course, the division director has to do. And so I could go on and on, but I'm there to be an advocate, to point you to other resources to make sure that you succeed, because your success is my success to a large degree. So then research mentor. Now, your division director may not be an expert investigator in what you're trying to do. That's very common for that to be the case. So you may need another research mentor who's more expert at how you get the extramural funding. Mm-hmm. And so that's very important to have. If your division director is purely clinical, for instance, you've got to have others that can really help advise you, read your grants, point you to the right resources, advocate and push you to put in grants. So I have that role filled, whether or not your division director is the person doing that. So I think I'll stop there and just be available for questions.
Allison can talk about the clinical research perspective. We do have this.
I'm Allison Wellens, and I work for Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. I'm a clinical research manager, and they're my counterparts on children's side. Emory has supervisors of research, so my role is across campuses. I have oversight and PI assignment of research coordinators and nurses. So often when I hear about a study or I hear about a grant application, it is because somebody needs to know how much is it going to cost to have a coordinator for this study. Often I hear about it in that direction. As Diane was explaining the intent to submit, that's another way that I find out about it. Okay, there's going to need to be services that are at Children's Healthcare, or there are going to be services that we need Emory coordinators, pharmacy, et cetera, and we assist with helping you find out, going through your protocol and detailing what are the charges, what are the billable items that need to be included on that budget. So it could be staff, it could be pharmacy, radiology, it could be ACC, it could be laboratory. We help you go through your protocol and really determine what are the fees. But we find occasionally you've kind of figured out ballpark this. What we really encourage is that we get specific quotes from these departments. Because it is awarded, we don't want to have to try to work around the numbers
that you already have been awarded. We want to really have an accurate view of what those budget numbers are. We assist with that. Also work along with the Sponsored Research Administration for budget development, the prospective reimbursement analysis, and I think there are some slides about that, so I won't explain more now. So my team's role, the coordinators, research nurses, is to facilitate grant development pre-award through to submission. And I work alongside with Diane. We're looking at these grant submissions throughout the process. What does it need? What paperwork? What budgets? And then once you actually are awarded the dollars, we help with study initiation. How are we actually going to get this started? Who's the population? How can we assist you with enrollment? And really, we follow through with you throughout the lifetime of your grant.
One introduction. Now, I hope you have an idea of the experts that you have upon you. And so now Dr. Shane will do a facilitated panel discussion walking through an application.
So thanks, Stacy, very much. So I'm Andy Shane. And for those of you who didn't know what BFFs stood for. Best friend. So it's sort of a common term that used in social media to describe people that are your best friends. So these were BFFs for conducting research. So I'm going to go through, Stacy put this very nice timeline together. We sort of alluded to it a little bit as each person introduced themselves, but basically thinking about a grant application in 3 phases. So the first phase is the feasibility analysis and the study design. Can you do this? Is this going to be practical? Is what you're thinking about the appropriate mechanism for what you're applying for? And that really you need to start thinking about doing that between 6 to 12 months before the deadline. So the best way to do this is to take the calendar, put the date that the grant is due, and then go back in time and put these steps on the calendar. Phase is laying the groundwork, which is usually 3 to 6 months ahead of deadline. And then phase 3 is preparing and submitting the application, which is between 1 to 3 months ahead of the deadline. So this is a high-level timeline, and this illustrates basically what we had on the previous slide. So the feasibility analysis is deadline under development for 12 months, and God says you see on the body between 1 to 6 months. Then the second phase 2, and you really should devote at least 3 months to this. So this is the bulk. So the application writing, the team member, who's going to do what in each team, and then the budget development. And this is when you begin writing the application, and you call the various BFFs to help you with that part. And then finally, the last 3 weeks before deadline is when you're really working hand in hand with your partners and your mentors and co-investigators to get the application packaged and submitted. Okay, any questions before we go into each one of the phases? Okay, so this is the feasibility analysis and study design. And so I'd like to go through and get comments from each one of the members of the panel about how they contribute to this phase. And we'll start, I guess, with Paul and Stacey.
Okay.
It's nice to have someone else do that. So the eligibility and the Stacey.
Perspective, it's just really high level in terms of looking at mechanism and seeing if there's any requirements about what level of faculty you need or need not be, and making sure that your bio sketch is what it needs to be able to be competitive, and talking to the program officer is one way that I always recommend doing.
Yeah, I would be sure that the RFA or whatever you're responding to is fitting the faculty member, that they have a realistic chance that they should be spending this much time to get things ready. I'm not doing a formal feasibility analysis for, let's say, a large clinical trial. I'm not thinking of that sort of feasibility analysis. I'm thinking of feasibility for my faculty member who I've been working with and what they're really trying to do. And then maybe from an even more general standpoint, are you equipped to do what you're proposing to do? Is that really going to be feasible? Are you going to get done? Are you at the right stage of your career? Are you in the right place? Do we have the resources to respond, the right collaborators in place? So I'm thinking in those terms of feasibility rather than a formal, do we have enough numbers of a certain population, which is a different kind of feasibility analysis that we can get more help on from our hospital databases and things like that.
And to that, I think there's sort of two ways of approaching being a clinical researcher or being a researcher. One is through funding mechanism and thinking about what you're doing and what your interests are and how they may match with funding mechanisms, or having an idea about a study and trying to find the funding mechanism. And that's the second one is really where Stacy can also come in and help us. So, a little bit about funding mechanisms.
Yeah, you don't have to find a funding mechanism that exactly matches what you want to do, because there's always parent mechanisms. But I think it's good to make sure that what you're researching is at least mentioned on a website of the funder you're looking at, because I think that is part of feasibility. You might have what is a very tricky question to answer, but is it important? And I think something you better decide early, because there's no money, if it's not really, it's really important, then probably not money out there to support it. So you do want to find a sweet spot of something that's impactful.
Yeah. Let me just give a couple examples. So, someone came to me one time and said, well, let's jump in and be the coordinating center for this network of sites doing this HIV-related research. And the response was, no, come on, we're not even in that network. How could you possibly think that we're going to be the coordinating site? We don't have the backup for that. We don't have the computational ability. So that was sort of an overarching decision of feasibility. That would have been a complete waste of time. On the other hand, people come up with a little bit crazy ideas. Can we respond to this RFA that we were marginally ready to respond to? But look, there's only going to be there's set aside money. There's only a certain number of sites that really can go for this, and we probably can. Let's risk and let's do it. That sort of feasibility analysis we've done, and sometimes been successful at those that are a little marginal. So it's good to have someone who has some experience in making that sort of feasibility decision at the outset, so you don't waste a lot of time.
One more effort that's up there. I think that, especially with Ks, where it's required to have 75% protected time, and that means oftentimes that if you make over a certain amount, your institution has to cost share some of your effort or your salary to protect that effort. And that's something you want to determine at this early stage to make sure that your institution, your division directors support that.
So share, is everybody familiar with that terminology?
Speaking of.
That's a Diane.
I know, do you want to give the latest term of cost share?
So there is any amount that the institution would have to cover that wouldn't be allowable on your salary. So if you're over the cap, then the cap is at 183.
Yep.
Right. It's at 183. If your salary is higher than that, the institution has to cover anything above 183. So that's the cost share.
Or allow $100,000.
Or if a sponsor only allows a certain number, then we would, the institution would have to cover that.
So what that basically means is you need to have those discussions with your division chief and department chair before full on planning and feasibility.
Don't assume.
And then the next step is thinking about resources. So is this even a feasible idea? And so Courtney, you want to comment a little bit about study design, trial design?
Yeah, so I think starting off, I'll have a quick example of where I've really come in early on in the process to decide whether or not the study was feasible. So someone wanted to look at reduction in mortality in their patient population. They already had a low underlying mortality rate of less than 10%. I wanted to do a randomized trial looking at the effect of two different interventions to mortality. Well, they needed over 1,000 patients. And they're like, oh, this is not right. I'm like, but this is your outcomes that you want to study being mortality. If you do this trial, then mortality is not the right outcome to study. because we need 1,000 patients. And so this helps people early on decide, is it a single center study, or do I need to think about making this a multi-center study in order to get the numbers that I need to have sufficient power? It also helps you think about, what is my outcome measure? Is mortality the right outcome measure that I should be studying? So the kind of things that I can kind of come in early on, big picture, help you narrow down what the right outcome measure is and whether or not you need to engage another center. And then a tool perspective, I speak on behalf of pediatrics that we do in Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, that we do have some discovery tools that will allow you to go in and get a high-level view of what your patient population may look like. Like, for example, how many patients last year had a specific diagnosis of this, based on ICD-9 code, and were admitted to the hospital. Or how many new diagnoses am I seeing per year? So you can get some really high-level information. And I do know that there are probably similar things that you can do over across the street with, Power. Do you want to, Sarah Marie, or?
Comment on thinking about
I would say most researchers do not come to us at this phase. That's probably fine. But there are some instances where it makes sense. So knowing if, for instance, the way that you can make your study work, I'm thinking of an example you gave us. If you can get a waiver of informed consent, it doesn't clearly meet the criteria. It's something that the IRB would have to decide. That may be an instance where you need to come to us and say, can I get this waiver? The only way I can make my research work. There's no point in going through with it if you can't do that. But more than happy to review protocols at any point you get them, because it just saves us both work.
Sorry. Allison, do you want to comment on, so when you have a population, helping them to determine whether or not that's feasible?
And what comes to my mind when you're developing the protocol, and now once you know who this population is, how are you getting access to the patients is a big part. What are you asking of them, and how are you going to make it as soon as possible? Are you seeing them when they're already here as routine care? Or are you asking them to come in additionally for some type of follow-up? So my team is able to help you in your protocol to decide, can we do this as an add-on when they're already here, or might we need the services, which Stephanie can mention, of a outpatient research facility. Also, would they already be having a lab draw on that day so that we can just get our extra tube during that? Or are we going to have to do a separate phlebotomy stick? It's those things that my staff can be helpful with. How are you going to access the patients when, and can you make this part of routine care, or is it a research-only proposition?
Great. Do you want to comment a little bit on the where?
Yeah, I really touched on it, I can't stress enough this feasibility portion of, can you actually execute what you're trying to do? And gathering all this information is really important. It comes down, if you are doing a human subjects trial, is it feasible to actually execute it in a human population? And then for us here, particularly a pediatric population, so access to the patient, what diagnosis or what study population are you trying to look at? Is it a research only or mixed standard of care? And then also, the earlier you can budget, the better. It's so much easier for us to plan for the use of ancillary services, or the use of the PRC, or the use of the adult across the street, or investigational drug services early on, than to try and, you already get an award, you've got a budget you did not budget for, and then we're trying to back into coordinate effort support or the use of, a research center. Or for now, NIH or federally funded trials, the use of the space, any research center sponsored by AXI is waived, but that is changing, and that's coming from the NIH. We are going to have to do subsidized cost recovery schedule even for NIH-funded trials. So be here. So even now, when you're in this grant planning stage, go ahead and start budgeting for the use of the space. And then also, just don't get the feasibility of, can you actually do any human subject. And everybody's been great examples. An example I use is I had a fellow for a subspecialty here who came. She had a fellows project. She wanted some assistance with doing her research in a certain population, and it included an oral glucose tolerance test. It's, you know, you have someone else with some different background. We all read research protocols very differently. I'll just say that. Like, we bring different things to your project. The more you can include on this planning phase, the better. So I had the project, and it was a great project, and it's little things that different people. I happen to have a nursing background, and they wanted to include 2-year-olds, and they thought that a 2-year-old was going to be able to chug 50 cc's of glucola in less than 5 minutes. Well, no, that's not going to happen. It could, but then it's the whole, you know, do you want to consider dropping an NG tube? And then if we drop the NG tube, you're going to have to get an X-ray confirmation, which is going to produce a radiology read-fee. So those are the things that in this project development to include in your feasibility. What are you studying? If we're actually doing a human subject, have one of us or someone up here really look at it as far as the execution of it in person.
Susan, with the service, I think a lot of researchers who are just starting out don't realize that there's a lot of issues that are associated with, you can't just give somebody a drug, that they need to be stored, it needs to be monitored, it needs to be dispensed, and all that in a very accurate way. So that's one thing that the IDS offers. So.
And drug cost is something to consider when you're thinking of the grant application, and to determine that up front. Perhaps even, some we'll get questions just about the cost of the drug before we're actually in the formal budget plan phase. For, you know, patients would receive drugs free of charge, so the grant would pay the drugs. So we in pharmacy can purchase drugs for your grant. But again, that's often a consideration.
And then also to consider dispensing fees and admission fees as well.
Which would be part of the overall.
Is it customary for like a drug trial to give free, or is it usually you have to pay for it in your grant?
The patient, or you mean for a grant?
Yeah.
Typically the grant pays for it.
Oh, like if it's a sponsor, it's like an industry-sponsored trial, will they give it for free?
If it's from a drug company, typically they will send drug to us, so they send free inventory to us to use in the study.
But they still pay the dispensing fee and the administrative.
Right, we have that for our operating costs, but for a grant application, we're often purchasing drugs. Since there's not a drug company sending drugs to us, we're purchasing it.
Okay.
So.
Great. And phase one, I think the other thing that's really important to think about, and somebody once advised me this, and I didn't really think about this when I was just thinking about all the logistics, is really start thinking about the publication that you're going to have at this phase. So someone said, well, what are your tables going to look like? And I said, tables? What do you mean? They said, no, you should start to think about what are the results that you want to present. And so when you're thinking about that, that forces you about some of these other logistics and issues that we've talked about. So I think it's really important to think about the outcome and the results that you want to present. So anything on phase one before we move to phase two? So we focus on phase two in writing the application. We recommend a full 3 months for application writing, team definition, then everybody's favorite part, budget development. So these are some suggestions. Have setting a schedule, creating a checklist, a budget line, thinking about supplies, key personnel, and will you need a subcontract, and should I contact to initiate a subcontract agreement. So once again, this is really a focus on personnel, and I think we'll start a little bit with the schedule and the checklist. Maybe Stacy and Diane can comment on that.
So I think in the game you think, oh, I kind of have the deadline in mind, I know what I'm doing, but it's not overrated to say to actually have a calendar in front of you and actually count back and set milestones and deadlines for yourself. And, you know, that's something that we've got boilerplate for, that's sort of templates that we can share with you, but I think it's a really, really good idea, because otherwise it just gets away from you. And by the way, the deadline's not really the deadline. You have to think about it maybe about a week before, and Diane can say more about that. Right, Paul? Don't listen to Paul, just go right to it.
Well, actually, and I'll speak for pediatrics, we like to know about it at least 3 weeks ahead of time. But for us, when it gets down to the last week, that's really crunch time. I mean, you have to really think about the workload that we have, that we're servicing the entire department. So most often, the pre-award administrator that you're assigned to will be in touch with you. Once you submit that intent to submit, they'll be in touch with you and start engaging in that conversation on basically what they need from you and what they're going to be doing for you. So you'll work closely with them to develop the budget. It's going to be constant communication back and forth to make sure that everything is in order by the time of the submit date. So just know that they'll work closely with you. They'll let you know what items they need from you. They may need contact information from you if you have a subcontractor outside, that's not children's, if it's another entity, another university. So just maybe work closely with them.
We usually just subcontract and say we're doing it weekly. I think that's another source of confusion too, that people sometimes don't recognize.
So a subcontract would be issued to another entity that is involved in the entire research project. So, for example, we do a lot of subcontracts with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. That we're closely involved with them throughout the whole project period. So contract is developed based on their costs and what they will be doing for that project, for your research project. So we gather their costs, their statement of work, everything that they will be doing on their side. And then when work comes in, we issue a subcontract that details that relationship.
And it's a pretty common scenario for Emory faculty in pediatrics to be doing research with children, so we see that quite frequently, and the process can be challenging, but it's becoming much easier.
Are you a subcontract if there's no cost associated with
No.
No. A letter of support could suffice. Mm-hmm. But I think does anyone have questions about the difference between a subcontract and just like if it's a vendor? And has anyone issues with that?
I have.
Is it true that if it's an intellectual contribution with costs associated, that typically triggers a subcontract?
Yes.
Right.
Well, more than that. I mean, we wish it was just that. It seems that almost everything you do between institutions requires a subcontract. It's just, there are different ideas about why it is. I don't understand them all. To some it's legal, to some it's patient protection, to some it's the financial flow, to some it's the intellectual, but it's really not the intellectual component.
Can I also add, when you're pricing some of these items with the ancillary department, keep in mind they will need to see a copy of your protocol. They will review this, and we give them the suggestion is that they have minimally 5 days to review this and get back to you with a budget. Some things it's very clear cut, but they really have to review it. So don't think that you can just make a phone call, get a price. You really have to give a couple of weeks for that, especially if it's something that's above and beyond routine for them. So make sure you budget ample time for them to get you pricing.
Move to letters of support. So we touched on that briefly. You want to comment on that? Tracy?
Sure. And then one thing that would be good to cover here is the difference between maybe somebody you get a letter of support from and what you call an other significant contributor, which there's sometimes some overlap between those two. Letter of support, and this is my own personal definition and like to hear from others as well. A letter of support is someone who's giving you something tangible, but you're not paying for, or you could be, but it's something that you couldn't do without, and you need to prove to the reviewer that you have the access to this resource. And another significant contributor is somebody who you're also not paying, but they're written into your grant and they have a wonderful bio sketch that you want to include with your application. That's kind of the differentiator I put it is. You don't need their bio sketch, you can just get a letter of support from them. If you want to show that they're part of your team and you want to use a bio sketch, then name them an other significant contributor, which kind of puts them at a higher level on your grant application. Have any questions on that?
I would listen to what she said. Yeah. It used to be we would put them down as collaborators or consultants, and that the wording became confusing. So another significant contributor. People are very happy to help, especially junior faculty, with those types of letters. It's no problem at all. It does help bolster your team sometimes to show that you have someone who has published in an area or is expert at a technique and is willing to help you really work through it. That can really look good to the review committee. So I encourage that. I've never seen a letter that came in of that type that hurt an application. So a lack of it certainly could. So that's really good. Jean?
Yeah, just a question between a collaborator and a co-investigator.
Technology is very confusing, especially as it relates to a K, and I've actually done a little research on this, pulling all kinds of research. So as it relates to a K, well, co-investigator is actually not a term you can use with K, but it's normally if you're the PI and somebody's also a paid keeper on your grant, you would call them a co-investigator. That's sort of the going. A collaborator is somebody kind of one step removed from that. It's a little fuzzy, but I think you're best to use clear language in your grant application. Stick with co-investigator. If it's somebody that's not being paid, stick with other significant contributor, because there's no gray areas around that. You know what that means.
Does it also depend on if they have faculty status to whether they can be a co-I?
It really doesn't. You can be named key personnel if you're not faculty. The key is, though, if there's any chance that person is going to leave the university or leave and not be available to your research study, you have to know if you name them key, then you have to tell the NIH and how you're going to deal with the loss of that person. If, for example, so I think oftentimes people want to list Courtney as key personnel, which she would be key, and also in Department of Medicine, their resource as well. You think so? If she were to leave Emory, please don't. then could Scott Gillespie take her place, and with a reasonable amount of time come up to speed and do that same project? If there's yes, you may not want to list them as key personnel, but you can use your certain in budget justification and really do a great job explaining her credentials, who she is, everything she's worked on, and so there's ways to get around that, to talk about the strength of your team without backing yourself in the corner, naming them a key person.
And then just also from the IRB perspective, though, if that individual is going to have access to any grant that's collected, they need to be part of the IRB. So I think sometimes with the IRB application,
Yeah.
the actual grant application confused.
Yeah.
And another point I wanted to say about the letters of support, I think it's very helpful if you as the PI are seeking letters of support from people, and you actually send the person a draft letter that they can modify, because if you have a lot of different letters of support, you want people to touch on different aspects of the grant. It's also much easier for the person doing the letter of support and more likely to get it back to you on time, and also helps you to keep everything sort of in the same framework. Anything on? I'm a little bit out of time, so I'm going to go a little bit fast to get through, and then I think some of the panel members would be happy to see questions afterwards. So week 3 is really the crunch time, the last 3 weeks before deadline, when you're really working closely with your RAS covers, making sure that you have enough time for formal feedback and getting able to incorporate reviews from your make sure you've adhered to all the compliance requirements. Have the submissions that you need. Sometimes some grant applications require you to have IRB approval, at least submitted to the IRB. ICAC is the animal use of your laboratory animals, study, and then just going through the budget and making sure that you have everybody that you need who's going to get paid or who's not going to get paid, and it's really set forth that the budget makes sense and is reasonable. And finally, the application submission details. Sorry, if you wanted to comment.
one I'd like everyone to be aware of is, even if we have the majority of the pieces, we've got them all, if we don't have your project description, your narrative, it will not begin review in the central office. So we do have to have a complete package before it actually gets reviewed in the central office, and what comes into play there is timing. So a big deadline, and you're considering all of Emory, and our analyst has 27 due that day. You don't want to wait till the last minute, and the reason I'm bringing that up is we would like to complete the package as soon as possible, early if at all possible.
So much to our panelists. I think our take-home message is if you want to keep your BFFs, start early. So let's have a round of applause for our panelists. These slides will also be available. Barbara will send them now. Barbara who helps us with all things administrative related to the K Club. These slides evaluations for a total of 1 highly coveted and not readily available K Club mugs, which slide evaluation will be a panelist in order to receive one. And we also would welcome any suggestions about our upcoming K Clubs, as Stacy mentioned in the beginning, and we hope to see you in the future K Clubs. Thank you.
That was a lot. A lot of talent.